Okay, first of all, when it comes to Rosh Hashanah, you have to realize that there's a lot of davening. There's going to be a long davening. The davening is, I don't know, Ohr Somayach, I don't know what time they finish, I don't know what they start. You talk about a 6-hour session in the morning, because they figure it started about 7:30, and I finished till about 2:30. And there are some shuls go even longer, some go shorter, but it's long. So the first thing you should do is to approach the davening, is approach it with there's this heaviness in Rosh Hashanah because of the day of judgment and so on, which we'll talk about in a second. But the first thing is you should go into davening and enjoy it. Enjoy the davening. Because the davening is put together, the liturgy for the davening, it's very beautiful. You should definitely make sure in advance that you spend some time, make sure you are equipped with a machzor that you like. There are enough good machzorim out there. There are art scroll machzorim. There are other machzorim that have interlinear translations. I like the art scroll. There are two types of art. There's the art scroll translation, and there's the interlinear translation, where it has the translation under the words, and it has like arrows, and the art scroll has arrows that point. Did you ever see the interlinear art scroll? See, what problem is with translating, if you have a word in Hebrew and English, they go in opposite directions. So in the art scroll interlinear translation, they actually have, it's apparently up for a patent. So if they have the word, let's say the word vayomer, let's say it says vayomer, and the translation is, and he said. And now the problem is, if you look at the translation, it takes your eyes in that direction. Well, what they do in the art scroll is they put in this sign. And it's so effective that it keeps you pointing left even though you're reading right. So that's the one I like. There's the art scroll interlinear. There's also what's called, there's the Metzuda Machzor, which is also interlinear translated. It's translated right line by line. It doesn't matter which one you get, just make sure you find one you're comfortable with, that you enjoy. And you can look at the tefillahs, you can look at it before Rosh Hashanah, and you can look at it in the davening itself. Okay, number one. But you should go in there it shouldn't be that, I better daven hard now because otherwise I'm cooked. As much as just enjoy the davening. It's a beautiful davening, enjoy the davening, if there's a break in the davening or the chazan is singing or whatever it is, you can take a look, look at, make sure you have something that you're equipped with. I just told the guys in my Gemara here, you should have another sefer with you also. If the machzor isn't good enough, so you have another sefer, take an art scroll book, something that you're interested in, because there are a lot of breaks in the action. And sometimes there are delays. There's the Torah reading, and there's a mishaberach, and then there's going to be time before the shofar, and there is time, there are the gaps of time. So instead of just sitting there, make sure you plan out something in advance what you're going to do, number one. Number two, let's try to understand a little bit what's going on Rosh Hashanah. There are different approaches here. We're being judged. What are we being judged on? Now, there are different approaches here. The approach that I find that sits best with me, not that it's the only approach, but it's the one that I'm able to relate to. And when I say that sits best, it's the one that can motivate me to get the most kavanah. The idea of davening for my life or davening for my health, that sort of thing, that's certainly a motivator. But if you understand it a little deeper, what's going on Rosh Hashanah is a judgment day. The judgment is determining what equipment a person will be given. It's like taking inventory on a human being. We are projecting, based on your past performance, what I could trust you with for your future performance. So for example, if a person has done well in the past year when it comes to tzedakah, let's say a person has given tzedakah, so HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, listen, I see you were good when it came to money distribution, so we're going to create a situation where you could distribute even more money. That's the judgment. The judgment is looking at what we've done in the past so that HaKadosh Baruch Hu can now give us the necessary equipment for our growth in the future. So if a person, for example, has devoted himself well to studying Torah, so HaKadosh Baruch Hu for the future will create a situation where he'll have fewer disturbances and he'll be able to study Torah even more. A person who, for example, has not been careful with speech, so HaKadosh Baruch Hu, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu has to create somebody who's, let's say, a chazan for the community. So this person's not going to have the merit to be the community chazan because he did not use his mouth properly in the previous year, so he can't trust you with that responsibility of using the mouth, and so on and so forth. It's a projection from the past based on what we need for the future. And to the degree, now, obviously that's an oversimplification because there are a lot of other things that play over here, but that's one of the approaches here is that that we're looking at. It's like a guy in business. That's how you work in business, isn't it? You're not going to trust the guy with a big contract if he hasn't been successful on the previous contracts. But if a guy has been successful with getting big contracts for you and getting good contracts for you in the past, I'll upgrade him, which means he may get a better commission and everything else. Did you ever hear the story? This guy comes into a clothing shop. He wants a job as a clothing salesman. Guy wants a job as a clothing salesman. So the boss says to him, "If you have any experience," he goes, "No, but I think I'd be good at this." So the boss says to him, "Well, listen, I can't give you a job sight unseen. I'll tell you what, I'll give you a test." He says, "Here I have a suit over." He pulls out a suit. It's green, purple, and yellow suit. He said, "I'm going out to lunch. If you could get this suit sold within an hour, if you get this suit sold within an hour, then you've got a job and a lifetime job. And not only that, I'll give you double commissions. But you got to get this sold within an hour, then you'll have proven yourself." The guy says, "Okay." The boss leaves to go eat lunch. He comes back, and he says the guy has got, his face is all scratched up, his clothing is torn, but he's got a big smile. He says, what happened? He says, "I sold the suit." He says, "You sold the suit? That's great, but how come you look the way you do?" He said, did the customer put up a fight?" He said, "Yeah, what, did you force it on him?" He said, "No, the customer was very happy with it. It's his seeing eye dog that took issue with it." So you're what do you call it? You have to what do you call it? Based on past performance, so HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives us, for the future, he gives us the equipment. That's one of the approaches over here. Okay. More than that, I want to go back to a point. Now, we once spoke about this, but it's also, if you understand this, then you understand what Rosh Hashanah is really about. I told you, I find Rosh Hashanah more challenging in certain ways than Yom Kippur. Because, you're in shul, you try to be intense, and you come home and we're confronted with food again. And so you're back into the physical world with your family. And you're also, if you have a young family, or you're around your family, which could always create issues, as opposed to Yom Kippur, where you're basically in shul the whole day. You're away from food, you're away from your family, away from everything, so you can be more intense. But my attitude changed, when I was young and frum. So I was just a nervous wreck on Yom Kippur, on Rosh Hashanah. And I made it tense in the house for my wife, for my kids. I was just very tense. And I realized, just relax. I'm not holding by that. If I was really holding at that level of 100% focus, then I wouldn't be tense about it. The people who are most, Moshe Feinstein was very, very focused. Nobody ever felt any sort of stress or tension on Moshe Feinstein. And he was very, very frum. Right? He was very, very focused. So we're not, if I'm feeling tense, that means I'm trying to do more than I'm really capable of doing. That's really an indicator. Now, let's go back to a second. We blow shofar. So we spoke about the shofar as being the symbol of tears, crying, that sort of thing. And we also spoke about the idea of subliminal suggestion, right? We spoke about subliminal suggestion. Then we spoke about that? That the shofar, touches something inside. We don't even know why it's having an effect, but it is created by God to have an effect on us. Okay. Now, one of the things the shofar reminds us of, that's brought down what it's supposed to remind us of, is the giving of the Torah at Har Sinai. That at the Har Sinai, the pasuk says there was a loud sound of a shofar. So obviously the idea is that when we hear the shofar, it should arouse us to make a commitment to that Torah that we've received at Har Sinai. That's one of the ideas. The other idea, and every yontif has like the person who represents, who's the hero of that yontif, right? He's the star of the yontif. So for example, on Shavuos, who's the Torah was given? Who's the featured person on Shavuos is Moshe Rabbeinu. On Sukkot, it's Aaron. Sukkot is called the Chag of Aaron. It's the holiday of Ben Adam L'Chavero, Bitachon, and it's called the Chag of Aaron. Who is the symbol of Rosh Hashanah? Which one of the people in the Torah? Avram and more than Avram, Yitzchak, because of the Akedah. We keep saying there's a Chus Yitzchak. We talk about Yitzchak Akedah. It's not called Akedah Avram, even though objectively it was harder for Avram Avinu than Yitzchak, because Avram Avinu is the father. For the father to shech the son is harder than for the son to give his life. But it's called Akedah Yitzchak, the binding of Yitzchak. And we constantly call Yitzchak's name into the merit of Yitzchak for the Jewish people, because that merit of Avram Avinu binding Yitzchak, that merit is a protector for us to this day. Okay, now let's go back to that Akedah, because it's something very curious, and there's a medrash there that needs to be understood. If you understand this, you understand what Rosh Hashana is about. The medrash says that Avram Avinu goes and he walks 3 days. They're going to get to Har Sinai. Not Har Sinai, to Har HaMoriah. Okay, so Avram Avinu takes the knife, and according to the Torah, he's about to shech Yitzchak, and the Malach comes and says, "Don't shech him." That's all the Torah says. He says, "There's a ram over there." That's what the written Torah says. There's a medrash that there was a conversation here. Now listen to this conversation, because it's a bit of a surprise. You remember the medrash? The medrash says that Avram Avinu, when the Malach said to him, "Don't shecht him," so Avram Avinu said, "Don't slaughter him." So Avram Avinu said to the Malach, "Should I strangle him?" He said, "No, don't strangle him." He said, "Should I make a little nick and draw some blood? Can I make a nick and draw?" "No, don't draw any blood." He says, "So what am I going to do?" He says, "Take the ram." Okay, so he takes the ram, and he shechts the ram. And then he skins the ram, and he cuts it up, and he burns it. Every step of the way, what would have happened? Let me ask you a question, Dylan. Let's say he would have shechted Yitzchak. Then what would have happened? Let's say he would have slaughtered. Then what would he have done? What would he have done with Yitzchak? He would have skinned him, cut him up, and burned him on the altar. Yeah. He's an offering. Then wouldn't have just shechted him and left the body lying on the ground. He would have been a sacrifice. So what did Avram Avinu do? He shechts the ram. And every step of the way he says, "Let this be as if it was my son Yitzchak." Then he cuts him, "Let it be as if this was my son Yitzchak." Every step of the way he does that. Okay? Okay. That's the end of the medrash. So Rabbi Dessler asks two questions over here. Two very, very good questions. Question number one, have you ever been in a situation where there was something that somebody wanted, you really didn't want to do something, but to show how gracious you are, you offered it, and somebody called your bluff and took off your offer? Right? Yeah, right? Like, there's a guy who you know is waiting to be invited to your house, and you don't really want to spend the weekend with him. And then you hear him, you overhear he's on a phone call. He says, "Yeah, Joey, we'll go fishing next weekend." So now you know that Frankie is going next weekend with Joey. So you go over and you say, "Hey, Frankie, you want to come to my house for the weekend?" And he says, "Nah, I'm going away." So, "Oh, come on, you could come over." He goes, "Okay, you know what? Yeah, okay, fine." And you're like, "Oh, why did I do that? I should have stopped when I was ahead. I should have invited him." He said no. Now he thinks I invited. By the way, you're not allowed to do that. If you know that somebody won't accept an invitation, it's called Genevas Das. You're not allowed to do that. You can't offer somebody where you know he's going to decline it, and that's called in halacha Genevas Das. You're creating a false impression. Yeah. So it doesn't mean we don't do it, but you're not allowed to do it. Now, imagine you've been in this situation where there's one last piece of cake on the table. You want the cake? No. Do you want the cake? No. Okay. No, go ahead. No, you take it. No, you take it. Okay. So my father, Olav Shalom, once did that to me. We were sitting at the table, and there was a piece of pie. The last piece. Now, any Jewish mother would never take it. Jewish mother wouldn't take it. She'd hurl herself out the window before she took the pie from her 16-year-old son. That wouldn't happen. I was sitting there with my dad. So there's one last piece of apple pie, what he calls it. The dad says, "You want to take that piece of pie?" So I said, No, you take it. So he looked me in the eye. He goes, "Okay, I will." And he took the pie. He said, "Don't offer it unless you mean it." Right? He wasn't my father. He offered me the pie first, but he was teaching me a lesson. Oh, did he teach me a lesson? I haven't offered a piece of anything to anyone ever since. He wasn't the pie that he cared. Don't be a faker. That was by my father. That was intolerant. He didn't care what we did. He didn't care about any. Don't be a faker. He had no tolerance for people shuckling, for people putting on a show in shul. He had no. Don't daven. You don't want to daven. Don't daven. But don't put on a show. Don't. That's where I got it from. That's where I got it from. It's in the blood. It's in the blood. So you're never getting a piece of pie from me. That's for sure. It was in the blood. So what happens over here? Avram Avinu goes to the Malach. Imagine what the Malach says to him. "Don't shecht your son." Should I strangle him then? What if the Malach would have turned and said, hey, great idea. We didn't think of that up here. And I would go, why did I say that? Why did I offer? Right? What's he doing there? Why is he going that extra round for? He was told not to shech them. No, don't strangle him. Can I at least make a cut? Yeah. Well, all right, Avram, relax. What's with the knife over here? You gotta until you slice something up, you're not gonna be happy. Question number one. Question number two. When he does shech the ram, he said, let it be as if it's Yitzchak. There's only one problem. It's not Yitzchak. Good. It's not Yitzchak. So what's going on? What kind of charade is it? So Rav Dessler explains like this. Rav Dessler explains that if you ever been in a situation in life where there was something you didn't want to do, but you managed it, you mustered up, you psyched yourself up to do it, right? It would be, imagine you really don't want to parachute out of a plane. Imagine you really don't want to jump out of a plane. But one day you decide, I'm going to get this done, especially because your friends are making all sorts of chicken sounds around you, right? Yeah, that sort of thing. That got me on a roller coaster, right? The one time that I did it. No, and I really don't want to do this. I really don't want to do this. But I'm going to force myself. Now imagine you go up to the top of the roller coaster, and I forced myself to get to this point. And at the last minute, the guy says, "Okay, the ride's closed for the day. There's something malfunction." What would your knee-jerk reaction be? Afterwards. What would the first instantaneous human emotion be? Come on. There'd be a drop. Right. You know what? I get a better example for you. Imagine, when I went to college, back in Princeton, is not where I went to college. When I was in Northeastern University in Chicago. No, not what you're thinking of. A lot of people think, Northwestern. So I don't correct them. When I say I was in Northeastern in Chicago, ooh. So people think it's either Northeastern in Boston, which is a good school, or Northwestern in Chicago. So why straighten them out? Let them live with their own illusion.
What is it called?
Northeastern, but this was just a little commuter school. No. No, I didn't. I just, as I said, back in Princeton, which I did not go to. Yeah. So when I was in college, every instructor, male or female, came into the room. The first thing they said, every single one of them, to a man or woman, the first thing they came in every single course, they said, my name is Mr. Peters. Your grade will be based on this, that, and the other. Every single one of them, that's how they said. They introduced themselves and said what the grade is based on. So then I realized very quickly, no one is there for the education. We're only there for the grade. And you need the grade in order to get a job so you can make money. That's clearly the idea. So what now? Imagine I'm taking a course in college. What's my goal? To get an A. They're giving me a final exam. I want to get an A. And I study for 3 days and 3 nights. And then I walk into class after studying for 3 days and 3 nights, and I pick up my pen, and the teacher walks in and says, there's not going to be an exam, everybody gets an automatic A. What would your instantaneous first reaction be? Yes. No. Your first, there's going to be a split second of a letdown. Like, whoa. Then if rational thought takes over, then you're going to go out and celebrate. But at the first moment, I'm so pumped up to perform now that all of a sudden you just took that away from me. Avram Avinu has gone for 3 days and 3 nights, where Hashem has said to him, take your son, and I want you to offer him up, and I'll let you know where. He's been traveling for 3 days and 3 nights. What has he been doing for 3 days? Thinking about it, with the realization that he's about to break through into a new level of a new spiritual height, because he's going to serve God at a higher level. So for 3 days, he's got in himself, for lack of a better term, Avram Avinu has psyched himself up to break through to create a new level for himself. So what happens? He's all, there's a test because he's a father, and it's with the human emotion. But he's pushing himself and realizing he's going to get to a certain point. And at the last minute, the Malach comes and says, don't shech them. What's his gut reaction? I need to be able to translate this inspiration into an action. So his first reaction, should I strangle him? Where am I going to put this energy that I've got, this ruchni energy, the spiritual energy? It's got to go somewhere. Should I strangle him? No. Should I at least make a cut? No. So what do you say? There's the ram. So what does he do with the ram? He puts all of that energy into the ram itself. That's why he says, let it be as if it's my son Yitzchak. He's putting that energy. That's what's going on in the Medrash. That's what's going on by Avraham Avinu. So Rav Dessler says, when a person has a moment of motivation, person is inspired to break through. I don't think that it's limited to a split second or 1 minute. That means a person wants to enter a new stage. Right now I am inspired to make an effort to get to a certain point, to break through. Says Rav Dessler that you must, at that point in time, translate the inspiration into an action. Because if you let it go and you don't, you only live with the inspiration, you do never take action on the inspiration, your level will drop lower than it was previously to the previous inspiration. I don't understand why. I've read his explanation why it drops lower. I don't understand why, but that's what he says. So if a person looks at Rosh Hashana, I'll get to your question in 1 second. If a person looks at Rosh Hashana is a moment of inspiration where we come out, we're in Rosh Hashana, we go in inspired, and Rosh Hashana itself is very inspiring. At that moment, the person should think in his mind, okay, you know what, I'm inspired. I got to do something. I have to do something. The something means a commitment. I am committing myself to, let's say, putting on tefillin every morning. I'm making that commitment now, and then do it. Then you'll break through to a new level. I'm committing myself to making sure to daven 3 times every single day. Make sure it's by the way, there's a difference between challenge and frustration. Challenge is good, frustration is not. Frustration, you back off completely. So it's got to be a commitment to something that you're realistically capable of. Somebody just asked me recently about taking on something. Not somebody here, somebody outside the yeshiva asked me about taking something on. Said that the person should take on davening mincha every day. Somebody who davens shachris, said the person should daven mincha every day. So this person said to me, that's a heavy thing. I said, you know what, do it once a week. 1 day a week that you could do? Yes, that I could do. And this person is doing it. They're davening mincha 1 day a week. If they would take on every day, then they wouldn't daven mincha at all. Because eventually they get frustrated and they'll drop the whole project. So it's a balance. You got to figure out what you're really capable of taking on. But the Rosh Hashanah is to create that inspiration. It's like, we go through the motions for the rest of the year. Also, we need a little bit of gives us the pickup that we need to now refocus and think, okay, where am I going with all this? Where can I improve? What can I take on? Not too much. Don't take on too much. Take on a little bit. But that's what the goal is. Somebody had a question. No question. Yeah. Go ahead, Dan.
No, it's not a question, Rabbi.
Yeah.
Just like maybe why teshuva as to why if you don't take on your inspiration, it drops down.
Yeah.
It's because learned helplessness. It's like, oh, I didn't do it, so it's like it's hopeless, and they kind of just.
Okay, could be. It could be. I checked. I read Rav Dessler a few times. I still haven't understood why, but I understand what you should do. That much, yeah. That at that moment that a person feels inspired, a person should really make that part of his personality. And again, each person, no two people are alike. No two people have the same what do you call it. But that's something that a person that's really the goal of Rosh Hashanah. Okay. There's another idea here, and I told you about the king of Morocco, right?
Yeah.
I told you about the king of Morocco with the bar mitzvah gift. Okay. So there's the idea of being mamlich Hashem, making Hashem the king, that we want to make Hashem the king. But there's another idea here, and that is that at the end of the day, when it comes to personal commitment, so we all know that, and this is what I was mentioning to you, that we spoke about how, people are difficult for us to deal with. We are difficult for other people to deal with. The same way that other people are my challenge, I'm somebody else's challenge. But there's a statement in the Gemara that says, Kol ha-merachem ala brios merachamin olav min hashemayim. One who is merciful to people, Hashem has mercy on him. The Gemara says that Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi suffered pain for 13 years. Part of the time he had what's described what seems to be an intense toothache. For 6 or 7 of the years he had an intense toothache. And for the other 6 or 7 years, whatever it was, he had what seems to be a kidney stone. Now, a kidney stone, I once heard an interview on the radio with a Marine, a colonel in the American Marines, who said the only time in his life he ever cried was when he had a kidney stone. So apparently it's not too much fun, right? Apparently kidney stones are excruciating pain. So apparently for 6 or 7 years, he had a toothache, which is also no fun. And for the other 6 or half of the time, he had what seems to be a kidney stone. Why did it happen? So the Gemara says that there was once a calf, and the calf was being led off to be slaughtered. And Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, the calf came over and put his head in Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi's lap, with an indication of, please, I'd rather not get shechted. And Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi said to the calf, go, that's what you were created for. There was an opinion that the calf was a gilgul of a human being, and that was his tikkun. But without getting into tikkuns, that got you interested. How? Yeah. Oh, let's see if we can go slaughter somebody. Yeah. No. So that's what the Ben Ish Chai says. But without getting into the tikkuns and without getting into just Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi said to the calf, "Go. That's what you were created for." That was considered an insensitive statement on his part, because. Yeah, you got to get slaughtered, but to say it like that at Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi's level was considered an insensitive statement, and therefore was decreed on him 13 years of suffering for that insensitive statement. Now, if you stop and think, 13 years, that means there were 13 Rosh Hashanas that came and went. That's a long time, 13 years of intense pain. When did the pain go away? When some sort of rodent got into the house, and the maid was going to kill the rodent. And Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi said, leave the rodent alone, because the pasuk says, "V'rachamav al kol ma'asav." Hashem has mercy on all his creatures. Leave the rodent alone. At that point, it was decreed in heaven, since he has mercy, we're going to have mercy on him. The pain went away. So when it comes to commitment on Rosh Hashanah, somebody was once seen speaking to somebody who was either mentally incompetent or somebody who was an annoying person, whatever it was. They were taking up a lot. There was a big rabbi. And somebody was taking up a lot of his time talking, and it was a waste of the rabbi's time. So somebody came over, after the guy left, somebody came over to him and said, how do you have so much patience? He said, I don't have patience. I have mercy. I have sympathy. If you have sympathy, you don't have patience. Somebody who's mentally unstable, you got to have Rahmanas on the guy. You have to have sympathy on the person. The person has sympathy. See, you don't need patience. You don't feel bad for the person. You feel bad. If you're a merciful person, so then you'll have patience. So the Gemara says, somebody who's merciful on people, HaKadosh Baruch Hu has mercy on him. See, none of us is perfect, as they say. Right? Nobody's perfect. And we all know that we have flaws that need to be corrected. What can we do in order to kind of tilt the scale in our favor, even without fixing ourselves up perfectly? A person works on this area of life. You work on the area of life having mercy. You see a guy in the street needs help. Maybe your wife needs a listening ear. Right? That happens, by the way. Right? Your wife wants to talk, just at the wrong time also. Right? Fourth quarter, close game, Oh, by the way, you know who I saw yesterday? And maybe you'll see her tomorrow too, but not right now. No. She needs to talk, or she's upset. Oh, I'm so upset. And you got to listen. You got to sit there. Ooh. You don't need patience. You have to have a little sympathy. Person's in pain. Person's hurting. The person is, what do you call it? That's called merachim ala brias merachim ala v'shamayim. That's something a person could grab onto. Go ahead.
Where's that verse from? I'm just curious. Is that Ramchal?
It's a Gemara. It's a Gemara. The Gemara says called merachim ala brias merachim ala v'shamayim. And the Gemara also says kol hamavir al midosav, one who is willing to overlook the wrongs done to him, mavir and lo al kol psha'av. Kodesh Baruch Hu overlooks all of his wrongs. That means if you're willing to, now a guy wronged me. A guy sat in my seat in shul. A guy took my parking space. A guy burned me in business. And you're willing to overlook it, then HaKadosh Baruch Hu looks over all the sins. I'll just tell you one last story. You've heard of Rav Nosson Tzvi Finkel, the Rosh Yeshiva of the Mir Yeshiva here. So, okay, his ancestor was the Alter of Slobodka, one of the original, founder of the Slobodka Yeshiva. And he was a founder of the Slobodka Yeshiva of Nosson. It's called the Altar of Slobodka. In the Slobodka Yeshiva, there was a bacher and there was a shidduch that was made. The bacher got engaged to the daughter of a wealthy Rav. And it was considered an excellent shidduch because, number one, he had support to continue learning. And number two, after the father-in-law, after 120 years, he had a position waiting for him. It was considered an excellent shidduch. So Reuven has this shidduch waiting for him. Shimon was a boy in the yeshiva, was jealous of Reuven. He was intensely jealous of the shidduch. So he went to the father-in-law, and he told his father-in-law a nasty story about Reuven. Some made up a terrible story, and the father-in-law immediately dissolved the shidduch. After that, World War I broke out. When World War I broke out, the entire Slobodka Yeshiva disbanded. They were all over Europe. They were all running around. The world was in turmoil. At the end of the war, about 4 or 5 years later, the yeshiva started to regroup. So this Reuven comes back to the yeshiva. He comes into the yeshiva, and the altar of Slobodka, he comes in to see the altar of Slobodka, the head of the yeshiva. He comes in to say hello to the altar. So they schmooze for a few minutes. And then the altar says to him, Reuven, about 5 years ago, Shimon did something horrific. He broke up your shidduch. He wrote me a letter, and he asked me to intervene on his behalf and ask for you for forgiveness. Do you forgive him? So Reuven says to the altar, listen, a lot's happened since then. The world, I forgive it. Forget about it. It's over. The altar says, no. I know that it hurt then, and I know that it probably hurts now. And I'm asking you if you could truly forgive him. So Reuven closes his eyes for 10 minutes. And after 10 minutes, he opens his eyes. He says to the altar, Slobodka, Rabbi, I have searched every chamber of my heart. I do not have any gripes against him. I forgive him full-heartedly. The altar looks at his face. He says, I could see, based on your face, I could see that you're sincere. I can see you truly forgive him. And the Gemara says, Kol ha'ma'avir al midosav, one who overlooks, HaKadosh Baruch Hu wipes out all of his averos. Which means that right now, since you're overlooking, since you're willing to forego, that means you have no averos right now. That means that right now you're a perfect tzaddik. And since you're a perfect tzaddik, I want you to give me a bracha. This would be roughly the equivalent of one of us walking into Reb Chaim Kanievsky Zatzal, and he says to you, give me a bracha. The altar Slobodka wasn't a humorous person either. He was very serious. He says, I want you to give me a bracha. So the bacher says, Reuven says, no, Rebbe, it's not for me to give you, I want you to give me a bracha. He says, okay, Hashem should bless you. No. Take both your hands and put them on my head and give me a bracha properly. So the bacher had no choice. He had to put his hands on the altar of Slobodka's head and give him a bracha. That's called a mavir al midosav mavir lo kol pshav. A person who is willing to overlook, Kadosh Baruch Hu wipes the slate clean. It's by the way, we've had this rule before. If there's a powerful effect of an action, that means the actions aren't easy. Because we're not talking about just a guy who cut you in line on schnitzel night. Okay, I overlook it. We're talking about where it really hurts. We're talking about where it really hurts. And you're willing to completely delete it? That's a person that, if a person makes that commitment, both of these things, person turns himself into a merciful person turns himself into a what do you call ma'avir al midos, so you're willing to overlook, so HaKadosh Baruch Hu takes that into account, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu works the way we work. So if we become that sort of person, so even if we are less than deserving on Rosh Hashana, so HaKadosh Baruch Hu is willing to activate the mercy button. Yeah?
So this idea of wanting to forgive people, the difficulty is sometimes we really, really, truly get this idea, and we really, 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 and we mean it. We want, we mean
What's
it.
the question?
We intend to completely forgive this person, and yet we can't change that. If I would, even after I thought this, and I really intellectually understood that it was not a hidden from Hashem, and I want to forgive him for every reason, and I do. The Maisa, if I walk into him now, I'm still going to feel uncomfortable with him as that guy who caused me that pain.
So there's an expression in English.
Get rid of it.
There's an expression in English. Yeah, it's hard. You are confirming exactly what I said. There's an expression in English, I forgive, but I don't forget. You ever hear that? That means you don't forgive. I can forgive, but I won't forget. That means you don't forgive. You don't really forgive. We're talking about getting, look, each person, listen, the fact that you're working on it, that's also a merit. We're not perfect. It's not going to happen overnight. But there are certain people who Rosh Shteyman, there were people who insulted Rosh Shteyman, people insulted Rav Moshe Feinstein. Rosh Shteyman said, and there were the people close to him said, well, we're going to have to respond. We have to go back at these people. Shem said, forget about it. Leave it. Doesn't bother me. Didn't bother him at all. Number one. Number two, he said, what do you gain by not forgiving? What do you gain by not forgiving somebody? Do you really gain something? You want this person to go to hell? Do you want this person to suffer? Well, what do you gain by not forgiving somebody? Yeah. Okay, now the person's suffering. Now you're happy? Now you're happy? Okay, what did you gain out of it? You still got to get up and go to work tomorrow morning. And so what did you gain by this person suffering? So sometimes we do feel like there's justice in the world. Good, there's justice, but that means we're not. That means we're at this level. We're not at the bigger level. We want to be big. We want to be big. That's what Rosh Hashanah is about. We want to be big. If we're big, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives us big. Right? He gives to us a gift. If we're merciful, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it's hard. You're absolutely right. It's hard. That's why there's such a powerful effect. It takes work. It's a lifetime of work.
What exactly? Can you
Give you an example?
No, or how exactly you do that?
By
Because, again,
practicing it. By practicing.
full
I'll be here. I'll answer you. I heard the question. The answer is practicing it. The more you do it and work on it, the more it becomes second nature and the higher level you get. When you're raising a family and one of your kids comes like, Daddy, I broke my glasses. How did you break them? Well, I wanted to see how far they could bend. It's not as far as I thought. Or you wake up in the morning and you see that somebody left a bar of soap in the Negovasser cup. Again, right? And the washing cup full of water. So the soap during its nocturnal swim is now half the size it was the night before. Or somebody squeezed, or somebody left the shampoo uncorked so that when somebody else took a shower and knocked it over, half the bottle of shampoo spilled out. And as a father, you could go bananas with this stuff. And not only the first step is to not show anger over it, even though it's bothering the heck out of me. The next step is to just get to the point where, you know what, I'm not even going to let it bother me. This is life. And the more you work on it, the more it becomes second nature. The more you work on it, the more it becomes second nature. Same thing with people. In the beginning, I'm not going to make any issue out of it, but every time I see you, there's that feeling, right? But at least I'm working on it. Because before that point, every time I see you, I was cursing you in my head. Now I don't curse you in my head, but I'm just, you're not somebody I really want to have something to do with. I have somebody to this day, there's one person to this day, and it's an incident that took place about 6-7 years ago where I asked the guy to do something, and because he told me he would do it 10 times, I asked him to do something, and he said he would do it. I relied on him. He didn't do it, which then caused ill will for a short amount of time between myself, somebody else, and myself. To this day, when I still haven't gotten over, every time I see this guy, I kind of move in the other direction. I haven't gotten there yet. And I want to get to the point where I see the guy and I don't see him as different than anybody else.
What if you don't? What if you never get to that point?
If I get to that point, then at least I'm not taking revenge. At least I'm not. But if I don't get to that point, that means I have not gotten to that level. That means I came up short in what I'm trying to do. And to this day, it's been 6-7 years, and to this day, when I see the guy, I still, he's the only person I can think of right now that I feel that way about. When I was younger, there were a lot of people, but they felt the same way about me. But this is a guy who every time I see him, he messed me over, and every time I see him, I feel, it's still a distasteful. I would like to get to the point where it's not. I'd like to get to the point it's not. I'm not there yet. It takes time. All right. Okay, we have to Rabbi Manel answer. We stop at 5:02. Everybody have a ksiva v'chasima tova. Enjoy Rosh Hashanah, guys. Enjoy it.